Good afternoon. I'm Pat O'Connell. I'm calling to order a special open meeting for the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. Today's topic is regional market participation. I think we have a new record crowd for the PRC in terms of attendance in this room. And so anyway, glad you're all here today. We've had a series of workshops, and that's proven to be, at least from our perspective, a great way to learn and hopefully advance the ball. So looking forward to that. And then with that, I guess we need a roll call. So I'll do the roll call. Commissioner O'Connell, here. Commissioner Aguilera, here. Commissioner Ellison, present. Next would be consideration and approval of the agenda. Commissioners, do you have any changes you'd like to make to the agenda?
I will note that we do have at least one public comment. So
thank you.
maybe we can, whenever you would like to take that.
I just say, let's follow the pattern we use at our open meetings, and we'll do introductory remarks and then public comments and then presentations. And is the order still good? SPS, then PNM, then El Paso? Everybody's okay with that? All right. We will proceed.
Do we have to approve?
Do we have to vote? Yeah. So do you have a motion to approve the agenda? And the only change is we're going to insert a public comment in between items 3 and 4.
So moved.
I second. Any opposition? Motion carries. I'm going to let Commissioner Aguilera have the last word and then take this over from that point on. So go ahead and get started. I already tried to extend my welcome. Glad you're all here. Again, we impressed by the effort and quality of the comments we received before this meeting, previewing the presentations. Also looking forward to that. Just my one topic on this topic, regional market participation. New Mexico, don't sell yourself short. I mean, that's a thing that happens to us here in New Mexico. We talk about how we're small, we don't have this, we don't have that. That ain't true for the topic that we're talking about here. Earlier this year, Cal ISO came in and did a presentation on their system, and just looking at the goals and of California and looking at the resource that exists in New Mexico. New Mexico is going to play a role in decarbonization, growth of renewable energy, whatever banner you want to put on it across the West. And then on the other side, we're one of the few states that is in both WEC and SPP. So we're going to hear presentations from Southwest Public Service. They're already a member of a regional transmission organization. SPP, I'm on the Regional State Commission or committee, and have been participating in that. I'm impressed with the professionalism of that organization. They are trying to grow the group of folks who benefit from their services. So they're in the West also trying to add groups to that service. And if you look at SPP's Western market expansion strategy, one of the sales points is diversity of resources. So a thing that New Mexico provides that SPP could use more of, frankly, is low cost, reliable solar energy. So no matter how things proceed from here, New Mexico is already in a pivotal position in terms of regional market, whether it's you're thinking west, whether you're thinking to the east, just by location and design, we're important to this conversation. So appreciate, again, going back to the quality of where we started here. I think that says to me, this group at least understands that this is an important topic. So thank you for that. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ellison, and then the show is yours, Commissioner.
Great, thank you. thank you to Commissioner Aguilera for organizing this, and thanks to everyone who is participating today, and especially participate those of you who have traveled long distances to get here. This is obviously a very important topic to utilities, to consumers, and to the commission. One remark I might make is that our focus today is on the markets. However, the markets depend on having free transmission capacity to work adequately. And in my view, there is no real transmission planning that's going on in our state. We have a lot of merchant lines that have been proposed and are being built. Some of them can't or do not plan to interconnect into the New Mexico grid, and so they are therefore of no help in terms of providing capacity for markets. They're good for bringing wind power to market, but they do not help with the day ahead market. So I think that is an issue that bears keeping in mind, that the market requires sufficient transmission capacity in order to effectively help and be efficient in bringing lower cost power to our utilities.
All right, I guess it's my turn. Normally I sort of prep my notes, but I'm getting more comfortable winging it, so I'll wing it here. But I just thank you all for coming, for your comments, for your interest. This is an important topic, and Mexico does have an important role to play. And I think that really goes to why we're here. You know, some of us, because we're focused on New Mexico and think there are benefits for New Mexicans here in terms of savings, jobs, many other benefits. And some of us, you know, are here who are not from New Mexico, and that's because we can help each other. And I think regional markets are a good way to do that. And we are better off, I think, if we help each other with our resources. You know, that being said, I am you know, believer in competition and markets. We do need to do our due diligence and make sure that markets are right for New Mexico. You know, we have various options, so that's something we need to consider. The market design is very important. And so I'm really glad that we have this level of interest, so we can think about these issues focused on New Mexico. And so that said, I'm happy to hear what the benefits are of markets. I'm also happy to hear, you know, what the cons are. That's something that I focused on when I was reading your comments. And so I guess I don't need to have the last word. I actually, you know, want you all to have the last word. And so I think we could move on with presentations. The first presentation is.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Aguilera.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll let you take public comment.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been together for what, 9 months now, and you're starting to wing it. You're starting to skip items on the agenda. Okay, so we have one public comment. Jordan, I think, is it online? Can you facilitate getting it?
It's going to be online. It's going to be Mr. Fernando Martinez. Mr. Martinez, feel free to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Fernando Martinez, the Executive Director of the New Mexico Renewable Energy Transmission Authority, or RETA as we like to fondly call our organization. I want to mention that RETA filed written comments, but we also appreciate this opportunity to provide oral comments as well. Just by way of very brief background, RETA was established in 2007 by the legislature to plan, develop, finance, and acquire high voltage transmission and energy storage projects. Today, we have over $16 billion and 8,500 megawatts either under construction or moving towards construction. And so I want to just start off with that, but talk a little bit about the Western grid. The Western grid was designed many decades ago when we had a smaller population and renewable energy and climate goals were not part of this design. But today we need more renewable energy, but the grid is weakest where the strongest renewable energy is located. Thus, we need more transmission. In fact, we've commissioned a number of landmark studies in recent years that have shown that although we have far more renewable energy than we could ever use in this state, we have less than 1,000 megawatts of capacity to take it anywhere. So that is the primary reason why we need more transmission. But we must also ensure that grid reliability and resiliency are maintained and even improved in some instances. And just as importantly, costs must be low for ratepayers. Currently, each utility plans and pays for transmission itself. Utilities are building large lines within their service territories, improving interstate connectivity. Also, private transmission developers partnered with RETA are building large transmission lines solely driven by economics. So we're working with merchant power producers, independent power producers, and merchant developers as well. But transmission takes years, takes a lot of planning, regulatory approval, and siting can each take a long time. To address cost challenges, there's been a progression of tools developed to help operate markets for sale of electricity and related products. For example, there's bilateral transactions that have been in existence. There's energy imbalance markets, which are intra-hour planning. PNM and EPA are part of the CAISO EIM. There are day-ahead markets. For day-ahead planning, CAISO is developing EDAM, SPS is developing Markets Plus. But in RETA's view, these efforts don't go far enough to face the challenges that I mentioned earlier. Therefore, the next step required is to develop a regional transmission organization that includes two other market functions. One is the creation of a single balancing area, and two is centralized transmission planning. What is a regional transmission organization? It's an electric transmission operator that coordinates, controls, and monitors a regional electric grid. An RTO can help with low-cost, reliable energy. They can operate the transmission system within a geographic area, ensure reliable electric service, operate markets for the sale of electricity and related products, conduct transmission planning, authorize cost allocation, reimbursing utilities or others for developing and upgrading the lines, and they do not own generation or transmission or approve or site power plants. I think there's 7 regional transmission organizations or independent system operators across the country, covering about 2/3 of the electric energy consumed. In the Rocky Mountain West, we don't have this. In the West, we currently have 37 balancing areas that are responsible for balancing supply and demand in their footprint. And a lot of times, in many cases, this just results in business as usual. That means having to overbuild power plants for reliability's sake. There's limited resource sharing. There's no incentive to build regional transmission lines and pay more to move electricity across each service area. And there's also less competition between power plants. So the benefits of an RTO are decarbonization, faster, more affordable path to clean energy goals, reliability over a broader geographic footprint means a more reliable system. There's affordability, it increases competition on the grid, eliminates expensive features of the current system, and allows benefits of efficiencies of scale. And of course, there's also economic development for states like New Mexico that can lead in supplying this clean energy, both for our clean energy goals and to the broader Western export market. And so with that, I'd just like to close my comments. I didn't exactly follow our written comments. I think those can stand in the record on their own. They're far more comprehensive than what I just talked about. But with that, I'd like to close and thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also you provided a nice framing for what it is that we're talking about here from a New Mexico point of view. So, Commissioner, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you. So if we have Southwest Public Service, please, if you could come up and introduce yourselves. And by the way, I also had you guys first because, you know, I thought that, you know, given that you're already in an RTO and so your perspective is different, I also thought that would be a good framing for the presentation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you all. Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for having us. Brooke Trammell, Regional Vice President for SPS. I'm in Amarillo, but happy to be joining you all today in Santa Fe. And with me in person is Jared Cooley. He's our Director of Strategic Planning for SPS, also online. I think they're connected and should be able to stay connected through the whole workshop today is Joe Taylor. He's our Senior Director of Western Markets for Xcel Energy, or on behalf of Xcel Energy, and also Nick Detmer, who's our Director of Market Operations and Analytics for Xcel Energy. So just roughly, I'll present high-level information today. Jared, obviously very familiar with our system and the evolution of SPP market. Also expert in some of the regional transmission organization, the RTO functions of the SPP. Nick, obviously very close to the market operations within SPP from a integrated marketplace, and also the evolution of SPP from earlier market formations and structures to where we are today. Also can provide some feedback on those kind of structures going forward, both in the SPP as well as the Western conversation with regard to market development. And then Joe, I think, can probably round out anything in the middle there that the three of us don't fill in, as he's very focused on behalf of Xcel Energy and following the Western market development activity for the company. So we expect, to be pretty conversational here. If there's something you'd like us to dive into as a resource, or any questions you'd like us to answer, we're happy to engage the experts that we brought today. Again, thank you for having us. We've prepared a pretty brief presentation, but we'll cover some topics here. I just wanted to start with a history of kind of the Southwest Power Pool's evolution, as I called it a second ago. It's my understanding, and those in attendance today could correct me if I get any of this wrong, but SPP was actually formed in 1941. With respect to SPS, we largely joined the organization as a transmission owning member in 1973. So kind of note, SPP started as more of an RTO function and less of a market organization, with the transmission planning evolving into robust market operations that we saw in the imbalanced service market and what we see today in the integrated marketplace. In 2000, as noted on the timeline, SPS included our transmission assets under the SPP OAT. So there's a FERC tariff, obviously governing the market operations now, but at the time, the transmission and transmission planning operations under SPP in that FERC tariff. We see a lot of dynamic between our OAT and the SPP OAT, and a lot of federal policy plays in, of course, to those jurisdictional tariffs, also influencing our retail operations at times, but primarily focused, of course, on our regional transmission activity, cost allocation, those kinds of protocols. In 2004, SPP became that formal regional transmission organization. In 2007, SPP created the Energy Imbalance Service Market, of which we were an early member and joined upon creation of that market. I'll talk about it a little bit more on the next slide as well, when we listed some considerations for RTO and market membership, and that's with respect to renewable integration. And so joining the energy imbalance service market, of course, that's not a day ahead market, but that did assist our operations as we were beginning in earnest to integrate more variable energy resources onto our system in that time frame. In 2014, SPP evolved further into more of a day ahead market with the integrated marketplace. Again, SPP joined the integrated marketplace at that time. And of note, the balancing areas that were previously maintained by specific utilities were consolidated with the formation of the SPP-IM, as we call it in shorthand. So you really started to see shared coordination of reserves and resources that also had an element of control change there as balancing areas were consolidated into one in the 14-state footprint. But from an economies of scale perspective, I think that opened up not only day-ahead market operations for SPP, but more resource sharing kind of across the market protocols. Today, SPP operates in a 14-state footprint with full RTO services and a lot of benefits that we'll get into around security, constrained economic dispatch, which is basically in my opinion, and Jared can correct me if I'm wrong, but a pretty fundamental part of the market operations and the value that our retail customers see from our participation in the market. So on slide 3 of our presentation, we've listed some considerations that we would encourage the Commission and other Western market participants to consider through this conversation of Western market participation, both in the conversation of an RTO or a market design of an RTO and an integrated marketplace. And these considerations, I think, are fair to consider in either order. So if it's an RTO formation that evolves into a market like SPP's experience, or the other way around, which is a little bit more prominent in the West today with early market activity, mostly on the energy imbalance side, potentially evolving into a day-ahead market, and then maybe full RTO participation in the future. So these bullet points can be both pros and cons to some respects, and we'll just step through some of the considerations. First, production cost savings and contingency reserve sharing. We wanted to hit on those because, again, especially with the consolidated balancing areas of the SPP integrated marketplace, we do see pretty tremendous value in reserve sharing, ancillary service market activity there. Essentially, that creates more resources for market participants to share if systems need assistance. And when utility systems are islanded and they're not able to rely on their neighbors or have those supportive sharing mechanisms be economically dispatched, that can create inefficiencies in utility operations. So we've seen efficiencies here as well as cost savings. The economic dispatch of resources in the market also produces cost savings for customers. Essentially, every load responsible entity in the SPP must carry enough resources or generation capacity to meet its own load obligations, plus a planning reserve margin. But then resources are bid into the market, and SPP optimizes the dispatch of those resources. So energy is dispatched on a least cost basis. So we move down the stack, if you will, from a resource perspective, and that ensures that the lowest cost generation is being dispatched first to the benefit of customers. From our perspective, we do see a lot of benefits to that economic dispatch for renewable integration. So as we have low or no variable cost energy resources on our system, we can trust in a market that those are going to be dispatched first or before other higher cost generation. That has the product of reducing production costs for customers. And also when we see state policy goals looking to advance renewable integration, that can be supportive of adding more renewables or variable energy resources to the system if the security constrained economic dispatch is going to prioritize the dispatch of those low cost resources first. And our comments that filed in this proceeding touched on that dynamic at a high level as well. Not only the renewable integration with respect to just kind of promoting more development of those resources, but the early imbalance services, I think, could catapult some of the renewable integration. I think back to the last decade of renewable integration for SPS, and Xcel Energy as a whole has been either one or two, number one or number two of the top wind integration utilities in the country. So as we've integrated tremendous amounts of variable energy resources, I think we're pretty comfortable saying that experience would have been much different had we not been in the early energy imbalance service market of SPP. And as we continue to add renewables to the system, that experience would have been much different, not in the more robust market we participate in today. With renewable integration, though, comes considerations around large generator interconnection study processes and queue construction and design. I think that's an important consideration for the commission to consider in any Western market formation. Those timelines and study processes can often be a deciding factor between when a transmission project is an economic project versus when it's a reliability project. And we see those kinds of policy frameworks and thresholds materializing with the regional transmission planning processes. That can affect the timing of transmission build out in a large coordinated effort like an RTO. And especially now as we add policy complications like competitive transmission projects in the SPP, we think those are particularly important considerations to be thinking about for Western market design. We'll get into this a little bit in the governance as well, but SPP especially is a very stakeholder-driven organization. So in these various stakeholder areas, we see a lot of need for consensus building. So sometimes entities get what they want in consensus building, sometimes they don't. So those are important considerations as well when you're thinking about governance and thinking about issues like we've noted here on slide 3 around regional cost allocation, particularly with respect to transmission build out, which would be a key component in the West from an infrastructure perspective, as we do see load centers in the West that are geographically pretty dispersed with not a lot of transmission infrastructure connecting them. I touched on the democratic process a bit from a governance standpoint. Again, stakeholder driven framework at SPP, again, compromises there in a stakeholder process, but it also creates a lot of opportunities for market participants to be engaged in those stakeholder conversations and venues, especially state commissions. We've noted in the introductory comments, this commission's participation in SPP Regional State Committee, as well as the governance structure looking at Markets Plus formation, and those kinds of stakeholder-driven committees where state regulators can be involved, I think are a pretty critical component to an effective governance structure. With respect to transmission planning in a full RTO dynamic, there is some level of loss of control. Obviously, that's paired with efficiencies in transmission planning, especially on a regional optimization standpoint. But we do encourage the commission to consider transmission cost allocation as well as generation interconnection queue design and construction. And that might be a process that needs to evolve over time as the West evolves in market maturity. I'll land with jurisdictional complexity. Obviously, in a 14-state footprint like SPP, there is many regulatory environments that footprint covers. There are areas that an RTO or a market optimization framework is not going to address. There are other areas they will be focused on. So transmission planning versus, say, generation planning. And so understanding which utility areas will be heavily focused on from a transmission planning perspective at an RTO level is important compared to what planning activities may be more left to the states or more left to retail regulators, and understanding the dynamic between where an RTO will focus or where a market will focus on that transmission planning versus generation planning that may be left to other jurisdictions, and how those processes align or don't, and how timelines possibly align or challenge each other. To speed us up a little bit, I'll touch on the governance again. And again, welcome any questions to Jared or Mark, especially, or I'm sorry, Jared or Nick, especially on any market design items in the SPP. But we do see a lot of benefit to the governance at SPP. Again, an independent board of directors does help ensure unbiased decision-making. There's a lot of stakeholder committees within the SPP structure. I've noted the Regional State Committee, as well as committees like the Cost Allocation Working Group. These are good avenues for state regulators and regulatory staff to engage in. It's a good committee, good committees for information sharing, knowledge sharing, and coordination among states and regulatory bodies. I think that's a minimum for future Western market considerations. And again, the stakeholder groups are open to all members. This is where that diverse engagement occurs. where consensus is often made, and sometimes where challenges can be voiced and vetted before they move through other committees or even to the board of directors. So we have multiple employees across the company that focus in committee participation throughout different SPP committees, and having that active engagement at different functional areas of our company, I think is not only required for full market participation, but is effective in contributing to the stakeholder process as a member in the market. The market monitor is an important consideration for SPP and other market operations. This is an independent function reporting directly to the SPP board of directors. It reports on market performance and can propose enhancements. As a load serving entity and also an entity that bids generation into the market, there is a lot of interaction with the independent market monitor. There's a lot of oversight from a market monitor perspective, and there should be. I think that's a design that SPP has embraced, and particularly the load serving entities respect. It is a strong force in the design of bids and offer prices for generation, and a really outlined and structured process in SPP market protocols. Those are the main points, again, that we wanted to share with you today. We recognize we're up first offering a little bit of our experience as a long-term market participant in the evolution of SPP market design. We have our experts, though, on the phone. You have our written comments. If there's anything we can dive into, we'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, we do intend to participate through the remainder of today's workshop.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess the first question I have is, well, maybe I'll make a comment and then ask a question. Markets are being developed right now, and they're not necessarily going to be perfect, right, initially. And so you've gone through this. Markets are constantly refined and changed. How concerned should we be about issues that are coming up in some of these markets that may not be our preferred options? How do you feel about your ability to, as a member, to change the rules, right? One of the things you're talking about here is control. I think that is definitely a consideration, but is that something that a utility should be concerned about? How do you see that?
I do think it's something utilities should be thinking about. Concern might be a strong word. I think it's understanding, right? And understanding the process that is in place, likely through a FERC tariff, if there is not agreement on a process. So, there is a stakeholder group, stakeholder effort to designing a lot of the market policies that get set. Not everyone probably has the same opinion of certain market policies. Ultimately, if there's an issue or a major complaint, that can be addressed at FERC, right? There can be a kind of a process that can be taken to FERC for challenge or consideration. And I would venture to guess that's a fair market protocol, if you will, for all participants, not just load serving entities. So understanding the design for that kind of challenge, if you will, that process, I think would be very important. But there are benefits where to the market participation where there can be influence exerted. And a good example that SPS has in recent history is what we refer to as our HPILS study and resulting transmission projects. So I probably will get the acronym not quite right, but high priority incremental load study is what I've always called it. And essentially what we saw was a pretty tremendous need for transmission build out in our service territory to meet our growing load. And that was roughly a decade ago. And our hypothesis was under the existing transmission planning processes, that process was not going to be sufficient to address our load needs in time. Now, that's not to say that the existing processes at the time were broken, but there was a special circumstance in our service territory where the processes were not conducive to serving the load that we saw in a timely enough manner. So we did approach the SPP to explain the situation, to reinforce the need for a shift or a change in the normal course of business to make sure that our load was served in a timely manner. And SPP was responsive to that request. We ended up with this HPILS process. And a significant amount of transmission was developed in our service territory. And Jared can kick me under the table if he doesn't agree, but probably a lot faster than it would have happened had we not approached the SPP and petitioned for a special study to address our load needs. So I use that as an example where, again, special considerations or unique natures of individual utility systems can be brought up in the stakeholder process, and creative solutions can be evaluated in a market.
Thank you. So I'll ask one more question and then I'll let my fellow commissioners ask some. With respect to control, I guess I'm sort of interpreting this bullet on in your presentation as a con. But I just want to clarify that it says control with respect to transmission planning and generation interconnection. Am I interpreting that right? You know, one of the reasons I'm asking is because I hear that from commissioners throughout the West, right, that they'd be giving up control. And I guess I'm wondering, is that necessarily a bad thing? For instance, when we're talking about like planning reserve margins, is it better to have a market operator help establish those? With respect to transmission planning, clearly transmission planning works better when there is an independent administrator. So I don't know, just your thoughts on that.
Sure, we did not intend it solely as a con on this bulleted list. I do think there are considerations there. There's efficiencies in wider spread transmission planning in an RTO. Obviously, that's a benefit. There's process with that though, and that can create longer timelines and delays. That can be a con. If the timeline of study processes for transmission planning or load interconnection is not timely enough, that can create delays in serving load. That can be a huge problem. So those are the types of considerations we encourage the New Mexico Commission to think about in its evaluation of the processes that may get established in a future transmission planning organization, or even in transmission planning efforts that may be conducted just short of a full RTO structure. So again, processes that get defined get followed. And if those processes aren't conducive to timely addressing transmission needs, it can be a con. But regional cost allocation, cost sharing, integrated planning, those can all be material benefits to utility infrastructure, renewable integration, and ultimately customer costs.
Thank you. Chair, Commissioner.
I just want to say thank you for being here. And just one thing that's baffled me at SPP was the number of acronyms they use. But now that I understand they started as an acronym, it makes a lot of sense. So if you were born as an RTO, you just create more acronyms. Right? So anyway, thank you for being here. And I guess I can confirm some of what you were saying about it is interesting to sit on regional state committee and think about control, because I can see how projects that are more expensive than maybe a small rural utility could take on can get built. But on the other end, you end up with urban versus rural questions and who pays for what. And so it's not like New Mexico Commission has no control. It's just we're competing for voice among all the other states that are in that bucket. So
I would touch on, it's not on the list, but there is at times an enforcement aspect to market participation, right? Whether it's in an RTO or in a day-ahead market. And so to the extent, we are not compliant with any market protocols or tariff provisions, right? There is a enforcement action that can be taken upon the utility, and that can be sometimes out of the direct discretion of a retail regulator. And so I think there's a symbiotic relationship, though, for utilities that do operate in organized markets, that retail regulators understand that those processes are put in place for a reason and that compliance with them is expected. And so that enforcement at an RTO level or FERC tariff level is, I think, respected by all market participants and retail regulators that oversee those utility operators. Another example, Chairman, of control there, but from a little different angle.
SBS has a interesting position being a vertically integrated utility within a RTO. What percent of your bulk power do you receive from SPP, from outside of your own generation?
I'm glad you asked that question because I didn't want to be the only one that talked today from the company. And I think this is a good one for Nick to also weigh in on. So Nick, I'm teeing you up, but generally, as I mentioned, load serving entities do need to cover their generation, or I'm sorry, their load obligations with their own generation, either company-owned generation or generation procured through purchase power agreements or other contracts. In the day-ahead market, as units are committed through offer prices, load responsible entities have to cover a certain percentage of their load. In the real-time market, that percentage is different, but essentially, and Nick can elaborate more, generation is bid into the market and bought back. So you may be buying back in the market your own resource, or you may be buying back other generation as it's economically dispatched in the market. Nick, anything you would add?
I think you hit on all of that, Brooke. Yeah, definitely. It's, most of our load is bought in the day ahead market. And as far as, and then also most of our generation is sold in the day ahead market. So they do tend to, our generation that's sold in the day ahead market does support our purchases in the day ahead market, and as well as in real time. So as far as percentage of our load served from other entities in the market, it's going to be a small fraction, maybe 5%, 10% of our energy is coming from others throughout the year.
And I guess what I'm getting at is what level of, savings are you able to achieve from the ability to get power from low cost producers outside of your own territory? Do you do any sort of accounting around, we saved X million last year because we were able to take advantage of lower generation pricing?
Nick, do you want to take that one?
We've never done it. We don't have an exact number on that, but I know that the SPP performs a market monitor, as well as SPP itself perform, cost savings analysis or cost benefit analysis of the market. I don't have a number at the top of my head, but I know that they've published that annually, how the market is saving entities within the participating entities. So that information is always available out on the SPP website from, I think it's the market itself prepares that.
Okay, that's fine. In terms of transmission capacity, do you find that the transmission capacity that SPP has is sufficient for you to take full advantage of any price differentials, or is there a bottleneck in the transmission system?
Nick, I'll take the first stab at this. So Jared Cooley, SPS. So from how SPS is currently laid out as part of the wider SPP, we do have interface limits to the wider part of SPP. We are kind of on the southwest side of the entire RTO. We have most of our ties go north and northeast into the rest of SPP. Now we do have interface limits, and so similar to anywhere else. And I think part of the conversation earlier today was talking about transmission is needed to tie load centers together and enable more flow of generation, we do have import limits. And so to address that, obviously more transmission need to be built, or sorry, more transmission is. But going back to Nick's comments about the amount of generation that SPS has, and following up on Brooke's comments about the amount of renewable integration that we've been able to push forward over the last decade plus, we were able to low cost serve our load in our load pocket because of that, even with our interface limits. SPP does perform annual studies and they perform an economic analysis of how generation should move across the footprint. And as needed, we'll identify economically driven projects to address congestion. And so in the past, that has identified projects in our footprint. Other times it identifies projects in other parts of SPP to unlock that low cost energy to reduce congestion on the system. And so, it's an ongoing process. Systems change over time. Generation gets added, generation gets retired, load gets added, load pockets go away. Load moves from one market to another market. And so power flow can change and ebbs and flows. And so it's just something that, coming back maybe to Brooke's comments about, the benefits or the goal of an RTO or market is just a constant assessment, making sure you're re-looking at it, to making sure you're studying it appropriately to find those new benefits and building those projects as needed to unlock those issues that may be out there.
So there's an interface limit between SPS and the broader SPP. Is there a north-south transmission constraint within SPP that could also be preventing economic purchases?
So I'm thinking back to the transmission planning studies and economic studies that are performed. There are flow gates everywhere throughout SPP. And there are some flows between the north part of SPP and the south part of SPP. It materializes to different parts of the year, depending on the resources that are being dispatched at that time. So yes, it happens. And again, that's where some of the economic analysis that are performed by SPP is to stress those cases to identify, is that a reoccurring? Is that happening enough? We pull operational data. We look at, SPP looks at frequently constrained flow gates and says, hey, these are happening X amount of hours a year. We should look at a transmission solution to address that. And then going back to Nick's comments about the state of the market report that the MMU publishes annually, they talk about frequently constrained regions. And that's another avenue to be looking at addressing those areas and addressing those flow gates to bring those wider cost benefits to all the members.
On the question of control that's been brought up on transmission planning, I understand there's a specific case of a transmission line in southeastern New Mexico that I guess this issue doesn't apply to a pure day-ahead market, but it does apply to a RTO where the RTO is making the decision as to which entity builds the project, and therefore when it comes online, seems to have a fairly significant impact on your operations. How do you feel about that? And is that just a trade-off that makes sense to make in light of the other benefits from being in an RTO?
We do have thoughts on that. I do think that example that you're referencing is with regard to competitive transmission development in the SPP, specifically recently the Crossroad Hobbs to Roadrunner project. I think this is a function of a process that was designed with certain considerations in mind, and some of those considerations accelerated and evolved during the process of the project. So to SPS, this is prime example of how almost any transmission project can be a reliability need in time. So a project essentially started as an economic need, certain considerations with respect to the appropriate timing of that transmission solution were assumed and built into the process around that competitive lines evaluation. Our load growth in our service territory is increasing pretty tremendously. Since the competitive transmission process started, additional load requests were made on our system that were not taken into consideration in the design of the evaluation criteria, I would say, that would be given top consideration for that competitive bid process. So we do see a result where a line is being constructed later than our load needs. Again, that has created a load serving concern on our system, potentially a reliability concern, and it does illustrate a deficiency in what was originally likely a very well-designed process, but perhaps limited a little flexibility to incorporate changes that evolved after the process started. So that leaves us as the load responsible entity managing that from a load interconnection perspective, as well as managing our responsibility as the incumbent utility in that part of the country to make sure that our infrastructure is ready at the interconnecting substations and endpoints of that line. And in other words, make sure everything on our side is ready to go and not hold up the transmission construction for the bidder that was awarded the project. But yes, we have seen processes that do not produce the most desirable outcome for our customers and for customer bills. This is, again, the evolution of market participation. I think the evolution of regional transmission organizations, particularly in light of now competitive transmission processes and other things. But that gets back to Jared's point of continuing evaluating the effectiveness of policies and procedures and reinforcing the importance and the value of a stakeholder-driven organization where concerns can be raised.
Thank you.
We appreciate your perspectives, and there's a lot more information in your comments, so thank you for those as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And next up we have PNM.
I'm gonna go. Good afternoon, Chairman O'Connell and Commissioner Aguilera and Commissioner Ellison. It wasn't too long ago I saw you this morning. I'm Mark Fenton. I'm the Executive Director of Regulatory Policy and Case Management for PNM. And with me today, I have Kelsey Martinez. She's the manager. Make sure I get this right, Kelsey, Manager of Regional Transmission and Organizational Markets. Kelsey's job is dedicated to exactly what we're talking about today. She focuses on regional markets and market participation and has been for some time, was very instrumental in our responses we provided. I also have Adam Alvarez with us today. Adam, he leads all FERC activities at PNM. We're very fortunate to have him, but he is also the regulatory lead on regional markets. He was also very involved in our response that we prepared. Also, we didn't have a lot of room here, barely enough for three, but we also have a vice president with us today, Todd Fridley. He's our manager of transmission strategy and development and has a significant amount of experience in regional markets outside the West from some of his previous jobs that you're probably aware of. Pardon me? We have another chair, Todd, if you want to come up, or if a question comes up, Todd will come up. But Kelsey's going to be doing the majority of our response today and presentation. What I would like to say is, I've said this before about the workshops, but PNM really embraces this process that we're having on regional market workshops. It almost seems like the Wild West right now when it comes to regional markets. There's a lot of activity going on. Maybe I shouldn't say it this way, but it almost seems like there's more questions than answers. There's just a lot of questions, a lot of options, a lot of things to consider. So we appreciate the commission getting us all together. You can tell by this room, I come up to every open meeting. I've never seen this kind of participation, but there's certainly a lot of stakeholders that are interested in this topic. And when I go to various conferences, you hear states are interested in this. It's going to take collaboration between states. It's going to be collaboration between commissions. It's going to be collaboration between utilities. So as Chairman O'Connell said at the beginning, New Mexico has a big role in this process. So I'm really happy to see that we have the stakeholders here today in the room. So we appreciate the opportunity. We did prepare a presentation. Our presentation's about 15 to 20 minutes probably is what we were targeting. So I'll turn it over to Kelsey. If anybody in the room, Adam and I can hand out copies of the presentation, and hopefully it'll be on the screen. If the commissioners need anything, we can provide you a copy. But if anybody in the room wants our presentation, we'd be glad to provide it to you. With that, Kelsey, have at it.
Thank you. Thank you to the commission, and thank you for all the other stakeholders in the room here today and online that are part of the conversation. In a lot of industry meetings these days, we hear about all the past failures in the West as we tried to develop more regional markets and how that was not successful. And the sentiment is always that it feels different this time. And while I wasn't around for those previous attempts, I can say at this point that the path feels like it's getting very clear. And I think the clarity is really coming from a couple of things. The main one being the need for regionalization has changed a great deal since these discussions came about. So the more and more renewables we add to our system, the harder and harder it is to act alone without sacrificing reliability or affordability. And we all know neither one of those can be sacrificed. So regionalization is really not optional at this point, it's a must. And the second, I believe, is really education. So I think there was kind of a systemic lack of education about the nuts and bolts of market operations in the West. And the past few years, our industry and our community has really done an amazing job developing learning and teaching experiences throughout some of these stakeholder processes. And so I really feel like we're in a good place, and that now we can come to these decisions from a place of knowledge and a place of understanding instead of from a perspective of speculation or how other regions did it elsewhere. So I really also feel like this type of forum, kind of speaking to what Mark said, is particularly important because we've all learned individually at these different stakeholder meetings over the past few years and come to our own conclusions with our own organizations. And it's very important now to come together and look at things in terms of New Mexico. So do we have the same understanding about where New Mexico benefits are going to show up? And are we on the same page with how how these different options are going to benefit our customers? And really, I hope we can get to the level where we look at the unique characteristics of New Mexico systems and really try to figure out what the challenges and opportunities are going to be as these markets evolve. So I really just thank you all for getting these conversations started at the state level and for being a real front runner in the process. I hope other states can follow along and we can really hear from the wider group. So thank you. I guess we can go to the next slide. I don't know who's doing that.
It's George. Next.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if I need to say this, but I'm going to say this. PNM is supportive of these expanded regional efforts. And we can definitely say we're supportive of what we see as our next step, which is day-ahead market selection and participation. But we also want to make sure that we're partnering with other New Mexico stakeholders and really being a regional leader and making sure that the effort doesn't stop there. So we want to be part of the conversation and keep those high-level goals in mind that will eventually, hopefully, enable regional transmission planning and cost allocation. We want to continue to have those discussions and be a big part of them. But today, given our limited time, and as this is being kind of the entry-level workshop on regional markets, we want to concentrate on what's immediately in front of us, and that's day-ahead market selection and choice. So what you see on the screen here is just a subset of the subjects that you gave us and asked us to respond to. And we really feel that all of those were valuable and deserve a conversation. And these ones are ones that we selected because they may have a very non-generic response as New Mexico utilities, or just ones that really are needed to address the importance as we get started on this conversation. So we're going to look at a few of these through a lens of day ahead market participation, and we'll get some key takeaways as we get started there. So thank you. Next slide, please. So before my role at PNM shifted to concentrate on these regional efforts, my role was managing the system operations group at PNM. So those are the 24/7 control room employees that are monitoring the transmission grid, balancing load to generation, and enabling participation in our current market, which is the Western Energy Imbalance Market. So I think all of you are aware, most of you in the room, that PNM joined the Western Energy Imbalance Market in April of 2021. And as I am still very closely involved with that effort, I can tell you that it is still very much a learning experience. Every single day we are troubleshooting issues in the market and trying to bring more and more benefits back to our customers with improved performance. So the benefits are definitely clear to our customers. We've seen millions and millions of dollars in cost savings through fuel cost savings that are passed along to our customers. But I did want to touch on some less tangible benefits that we've seen through EIM operations. And that's really, the fact that the Western Energy Imbalance Market inspired trust and confidence in markets in the West. So when I talk about trust, I want to mention a few things. One is trust in the market itself. So no doubt we've seen, even before we were participants in the market, we've seen a decade now of others participating in the market, and we've seen no reliability issues or degradation as a result. We also have not seen price volatility swings as a result of market operations, even during times of scarcity. So we do feel confident in the market itself and in the market operator. And we really feel that both of those things have stabilized within operations, even in a time frame where we were adding more and more renewable generation to the grid at the same time. But I did want to talk about trust also with our region. So every time, I do hope the community appreciates how complex integrating and operating these markets day in and day out is. And it ends up where you're working with your neighbors through some very, very complicated issues. And it's not just during market integration. As others were saying, when markets change, and they frequently do, you have a lot of work to do even once you're in the market. So every time there's new generation added, every time a new market participant enters, or if new software is added to your neighbor or through the market operations, it creates a lot of tough work and a lot of need for regional conversations with your direct neighbors, even within the market. So through that process, we can often look around to our neighboring entities, El Paso and Arizona entities that surround us in the market. And we're doing the hard work together. We're building those relationships, we're building trust, and we can dig in and look around and say, hey, we've done all of this and we're seeing mutual benefits. And the point here is just being that we want to make sure that we focus on that and keep that in our mind for when I talk about seams and market footprint in a few slides, because that regional trust is something that I hope we can bring along with us into the day ahead market. I mentioned confidence as well. So in this way, I'll just speak on behalf of PNM, but we feel we've been successful in EIM, and we really feel confident now that we can be successful in a day ahead market as well. So that confidence has made us committed to do the hard work and get the additional benefits that are going to come with a day ahead market for PNM. So we're ready to do that. And I speak to that on a personal level because I don't think I'm going to get out of any of that work. Next slide. Okay. So I don't think that there's much unknown here about the day ahead market options on the table, but I'll address them. So the two ones that we're looking at here and that are available in the near term are EDAM, which is the extension of California's day ahead market, and Markets Plus, which is based on the design of SPP RTO's existing day ahead market. And both of those market designs required some tweaks. And that was really needed because neither one of those footprints have individual BAs, balancing authority areas, within them, and they also don't have individual transmission tariffs within them too. So it always sounds like it would be easy to just rubber stamp the market design here for the West, the greater West, but instead it's involved quite a complicated process in ironing out the BA level granularity needs and the individual market tariff needs as well. So that's a lot of work, and the stakeholder processes on both sides, CAISO and SPP, have been great and a valuable learning experience. I'll point out just for clarity that for those listening in, that just because we're talking today about joining a day ahead market, that doesn't mean that we would cease operations in a real-time market. So just for clarity, both of these are kind of package deals. And if you join a day ahead market, you're required to be in their real-time market as well. And the benefits are additive as a result. Next slide then. So benefits to rate. Oh,
Jordan, actually, can you stay on that same slide that you were on? Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
no problem. Oh, I see the benefits one. Okay. So this is the goal, right? This is why we're here. We're wanting to get more and more benefits to our ratepayers and to our customers. And on this slide, I'm just going to start and end with the same point for emphasis. And that is really that PNM feels confident that both market operators and both market options really provide the ability to capture similar benefits. So as we evaluate these market choices, and we're very happy with the stakeholder processes involved, and we feel that both of these market operators are proven, and we can look back in their history and see that they've accomplished a lot with their day ahead markets alone. Less and less of the decision feels about the market operator and the market design, and more of it feels really about who's in the market with you. So which resources are in the market, which transmission is in the market, what loads are in the market. We all know that day ahead markets are going to increase competition with more and more economic choices in the market. We know that they're going to build on incremental production cost savings that we had in real time and offer more of those. They're both going to help us meet our carbon emission goals. And we've seen increased reliability, partially due to the resource diversity across these footprints. Also because markets come with additional situational awareness tools for market operators that and system operators at individual utilities that really give you early insight into reliability problems. And I'll end with this kind of the same point. So PNM really feels confident that both market designs are sufficient. We've appreciated the stakeholder processes on both sides of that. And the choice is really coming down to more about what our neighbors are able to do and which resources and which loads and which transmission are in the market. So governance has been a hot topic in the West for some time now, and we just want to make sure that PNM's thoughts are known here today. So the purpose of governance is really making sure that there's meaningful participation from all different stakeholders. And we feel secure and confident that both day ahead market options have proposed governance structures that are sufficient for day ahead market participation. Both are providing meaningful opportunities for state level participation. Both provide sufficient input for market participants and other stakeholders within the market. And both are going to support New Mexico carbon reduction policies. So really the only difference is that Markets Plus has a multi-state governance structure at the highest level. And we feel that is adequate to move forward even past a day ahead market. And with CAISO, we're going to be following closely efforts that are attempting to put the CAISO market structure under the same governance model. So we're going to be following that, and we're supportive of that process as well. And they're moving at a high speed, so we'll be following them quickly. The next slide with the seams. So seams is really kind of where the bulk of our decision is going to be located. And by seams, I really mean kind of seams / market footprint. And the commission did a great job in highlighting the importance of market footprint size in the questions that we received. And as we've seen from many studies, including the state-led study, the recent Brattle study, and the WMEG E3 study, which we attached in our comments, all of them arrive at the same conclusion that market footprint size is synonymous with increased benefits. And also, part of the reason for that is resource diversity, and part of it is just more customers and more load results in more competition. And we want to make sure that we're looking at other types of diversity besides just resource diversity. The West already has a great deal of other types of diversity because we're such a giant interconnection, and we don't want to lose some of that in our market choice. So there's the time zone diversity. So, you know, when the sun is rising in New Mexico, it has not yet risen in Arizona and California. We don't want to miss out and start losing out on that diversity. There's also a great deal of north to south diversity, which we hope expands, but New Mexico solar and wind looks pretty good to the Pacific Northwest, and their hydro looks pretty good to us too. So we're hoping we can be in the same market footprint as that type of resource diversity as well. But the bottom line is, no matter how much generation you have in your footprint and how that diversity plays out, if you don't have the transmission connectivity connecting you to that, then you might as well just be optimizing your own resources and not be in a market. So the transmission connectivity is really kind of it's coming down to the deciding factor, at least in the short term, for PNM's market choice. And we talk about this a lot more in our comments, but at a high level, the majority of PNM's transmission connectivity is really to the west of us through Arizona utilities and to the south of us through El Paso Electric. We do have the Blackwater DC converter that connects us to the Eastern interconnection. It's only 200 megawatts, and the lines to get there are already very congested because that is also where all of our wind farms are connected. And we do have very few transmission lines that go between Colorado and New Mexico. So there is just not much north to south diversity or transmission connectivity there. So part of the education we had over the past 2 to 3 years was through our participation in the WMEG group, or WEMEG, however people want to say it. That was mostly had an educational focus, and it's where we shared a lot of knowledge and learned a lot. But another benefit was that the entities, 25 or 26 utilities, provided E3 with data to build a kind of a new network model that is able to run production cost studies. Already have done some, but it's available for us to use in the future as well. So we included the group level study in our comments to you guys, and we really hope to talk in more detail about that study in the future. And we've talked with El Paso Electric and E3, and if you all feel it's appropriate and want to hear, we're interested in coming together for a discussion on the details of that study in the future. But at a high level, we did already run one sensitivity that we knew would be important, and that was showing Arizona utilities in a separate market footprint from PNM and El Paso. And we were expecting to see a huge reduction in production cost benefits, and we did indeed. So it just highlights the importance of transmission connectivity and production costs, which is really your main benefit from joining a day-ahead market. So you can't speak to the commission without talking about reliability, which is a good thing, right? And the big story here, I hope, is that reliability wouldn't change in a day-ahead market. So the NERC standards are not going to change if we're in one market or another market, or if we're in no market at all. PNM will remain responsible with our NERC functionality as a balancing authority, a transmission planner, a transmission operator, and a transmission owner. That's where the NERC standards apply, and we will be responsible going forward in a day-ahead market operations. We do want to emphasize and believe that increasing regional collaboration is already currently essential for reliability. And it's only going to get more and more important as we move towards more variable energy resources on the grid. So the greater penetration of these variable energy resources come with just much heavier use of our transmission system. And all of that could have a very negative impact to reliability. Regional markets are really going to help to minimize that. So really the important message here is that PNM will remain responsible for delivering safe and reliable power to our customers. So that really brings us to some key takeaways and some concluding statements. Once again, we just want to express appreciation for the commission in opening up the inquiry. You know, we've heard that this could be kind of the start of many discussions on regional markets, and we feel that that's important, and we look forward to participating in those as well. We want to emphasize that we expect to have chosen a day-ahead market in 2024, and we're prepared to do the hard work that comes with that and bring those benefits back to New Mexico and to our customers. We want to emphasize that we expect day-ahead market participation is going to create and build on the trust and confidence that has come with our EIM participation. So just like real-time markets have enabled a daytime market participation, we think that same trust and confidence is really just going to grow into more. And we really want to emphasize that although it would be great to jump into the most idealized solution right away, the last thing we want is for some reliability impact of a too quick movement in the market sphere or huge price volatility to set us back a decade. So we recognize that this trust is still delicate, and we really want to move with our region as we move forward into these day-ahead market operations. And finally, we just want to encourage commissioners, market operators, market participants, and other stakeholders to really work through these stakeholder processes and be very engaged, because we feel that minimizing the time of uncertainty and great change in our industry at this point is really going to just help make our path much clearer, much faster, and really result in more benefits to customers sooner. So that's really the end of my statements, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you for an excellent presentation, and your responses were also very good, very informative, and I learned a lot from reading your responses. So thank you for those. I do have some questions. So in your responses, you explained that the largest amount of benefits produced from moving to a day-ahead market will be through production cost savings, whereby synergies from the diversity of energy resources are realized. Can you explain how those benefits translate into customers' bills?
Yes. So in the market optimization solutions, the market algorithms stack your load in the whole market footprint with the least cost generation until you reach the market clearing price. And the market clearing price is going to be the lowest cost solution that is able to be served with the transmission network model on top of that solution. So it's the lowest cost that can be delivered to customers. And in doing so, your customers are paying less. PNM is paying less to serve their load by using the most economic dispatch solution. So it ends up resulting in lower customer bills because we're passing those savings along through the fuel and purchase power clause. And we currently pass 100% of that onto customers.
Thank you for that explanation. I think we're going to have to find a simpler way to send that message.
We can help with that.
Yeah. And then in answering the questions about pros and cons to New Mexican ratepayers, you explained with respect to extreme weather that would not historically affect your system, that there's a possibility of facing higher energy prices. And I certainly agree that, it can happen. For example, in August of 2020, we had a West-wide heat event where, prices were outrageously high. And so I guess my question is, wouldn't you face those high prices either way, whether you are in a market or not? And then a second part to it is whether conversely, if there is extreme weather in New Mexico, which, wildfires, I think we're prone to all of that, can a regional market then help get access to lower cost electricity?
Right. Yes. Okay. So on the first part of the question, the LMPs, or the market clearing price, is based on the most expensive generation that ended up clearing the load stack in the market solution. So in the case of extreme weather outside of New Mexico, it would be possible that our own resources could have served our own loads for less than that market clearing price. But that's going to be a very rare situation. And in general, the savings that you get from economic dispatch on a large region would vastly overwhelm those small times of scarcity, where the market clearing price would be more than if you were serving your own load with your own resources. So I hope that answers your first question. And your second question, yes, I think if you flip that a little bit and have a situation where there's extreme weather in New Mexico, we could definitely benefit from lower marginal energy costs across the footprint that are not constrained, and where we're limited to serving our load with our own resources.
Thank you for that explanation. So I'll ask one more and then turn it over to my fellow commissioners. What topics do you recommend that we focus on in future workshops?
So one topic that really is the most uncertain, in my view, when we go and talk about day-ahead markets and even beyond, is how the market is going to use transmission. If the market is requiring transmission to be completely made available to the market, and if there's exceptions to that. And some of your questions did approach those in our responses as well. So the main reason I think that's so important for New Mexico is we are an exporter. We have a ton of wind and solar that's only going to grow. And when you look at how much we're delivering outside, it becomes complicated if those energy resources are going to always be moved outside of a market footprint. So we have a lot of transmission firm reservations that are serving California with our wind resources, and they are always moving outside. And if those are in a different market footprint than PNM ends up in, then it's a little bit unclear exactly how that's going to work, how it's going to be optimized, which market optimization, if there's two, ends up doing that. And it becomes especially complicated when it's a variable energy resource like wind. So you can't just say, hey, let's reserve 200 megawatts on this line for this wind because it's constantly fluctuating. So the use of transmission in the market optimization and the revenue that comes back as a result of that are both things that are still relatively unclear to me, and something we want to dig more into with the transmission rights owners as well. So like Pattern and those that own a whole bunch of transmission rights in our territory, they're going to be the ones that make decisions on how to use their transmission rights in the market. And we really want to make sure that we know what to expect and can help make decisions that are good for both of us in those regards.
Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, and we also, as I mentioned before, we really do help to talk through the WMEG study more in detail.
I was about to ask about that as well. Okay, Chair, Commissioner Ellison.
Well, I just wanted to build on what you just said. Thank you for sharing that bit of the WMEG study. As a nerd, I really wanted to get my fingers on that and see what that said. So thank you. One thing that I saw and heard in the answers is it was focused on production cost. When I look at, I know we're talking in the West about next step being day ahead, but a lot of people are seeing that as prelude to an RTO.
Mm-hmm.
Then working back from where we started, RTO in SPP, one of the value propositions for that is doing things like minimizing reserve margins across BAs. And then thank you for your point about how the transmission network will be used. I mean, that for me anyway, just as an aside, is a great example of how these workshops have been fantastic. And I hadn't thought about that. So thank you for that. But the question I had was, these models that we're looking at, is there also an optimization around minimizing the capacity it needs to get built on the transmission side? So to me, there's three potential buckets of cost: production cost, and you're on it, capacity savings, and transmission optimization. Which of those is most important for PNM's customers? How can we learn about capacity savings as things evolve, and how transmission build outs being optimized?
Mm-hmm. So I might need Todd's help with this one. But I really, PNM agrees that we need much more a better way to plan transmission. And so in that regard, PNM is really looking forward to trying to find ways even before RTOs come about in enabling transmission development. So we're kind of, looking at any and all options on the table to make that happen more. And that might be the most important one for transmission customers, just given the renewable potential in our state. And like Fernando mentioned from Rita, just the lack of capability to deliver that at this point. That's a place where New Mexico as a state could really see a lot of benefits, and it's limited currently, and there's no current process that's going to just make that happen overnight. Even with an RTO enabling the cost allocation and the regional planning, you still run into siting and permitting issues. So it's just such a messy problem, and that's probably the biggest one for New Mexico customers. And then you mentioned production costs, and what was the other one you were?
Well, I mean, the WMEG group is focusing on production cost, capacity savings, and transmission optimization, recognizing need to build, but don't overbuild or stick New Mexico customers with costs.
Okay.
That's what I'm concerned with. And then again, we're in the middle of this big conversation about footprints.
Mm-hmm.
How big of difference does footprint have on capacity and transmission
Mm-hmm.
build required? I just haven't seen anything to give me any guidance on that.
Right. Yeah. The transmission connectivity is what enables the production cost savings. So in that way, they're very related. And although a day-ahead market is not going to directly benefit transmission development in the short term. We do think it will inform transmission development, just because like SPS was talking about, market data gives you things like information on exactly what flow gates were constrained and how often. Even our participation in EIM gives us that kind of data. So it's, you're really able to see and help that guide you on where new transmission is needed and where it would relieve cost constraints and result in more economic dispatches over time.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm being struck by learning lots of things right now, but then also remembering that joke that it's a way homer. And I think a lot of this is a way homer for me. As I drive home, I'm like, oh, that was important too. I'll turn it over to you.
Just a couple of questions. The current EIM structure is that free transmission capacity, whatever transmission capacity is free at the moment is what's available for use on the EIM, correct?
Correct.
And is that same statement true for the day-ahead markets as they are currently being envisioned?
Yes, so that will not go away with the day-ahead market. The difference is that the day-ahead market optimization and the resulting market trades are going to have optimized that already going into it. So today, when you have long-term contracts that's delivering energy across a very long path out of the market, those are already base scheduled into the EIM model. So the market is going to deliver that a long way. And the benefit of a day-ahead market is it's going to optimize that already. So resources that might have been delivered over long distances might not be using that transmission, and then more transmission would be unlocked for the real-time imbalance market.
Do merchant power lines contribute capacity?
The transmission rights holders, and this is where I think there's still some uncertainty, but definitely with the EDAM proposed model, the transmission rights holders really have several options in how to allow their transmission to be participating in the market or not. So there's pathways and buckets, and we can go into this in more detail with future workshops. But right now, the transmission rights holders are, at least in EDAM, are dictating how the market gets to use the transmission. And there is incentive for them to give the market the transmission in order to optimize.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thank you so much for a great presentation. We'll be in touch about future workshops.
Thank you.
You much like Art O'Donnell, we know where you worked.
I'm just doing a time check. We're at 4:10, and so we've gone a little bit over what I was hoping, but I don't want to get in the way of a good conversation. And so I think we might go past a little bit past 5 o'clock. So up next we have Paso Electric, and then maybe we can talk about a short break if that would be needed.
That's almost how to roll the chair.
So, thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speaking with you about this. We think it's obviously a very important topic. We want to thank you for taking the initiative to open up this inquiry. I think it speaks volumes as to the positive direction for energy markets in New Mexico, that we are able to have this conversation. And we're starting this up early. My name is Emmanuel Villalobos. I'm the Director of Market Development and Resource Strategy for El Paso Electric. With me today is Jesse Gonzalez. He's our Regional Director of State Legislative Affairs. And we have Judith Parsons, who is our Senior Strategy Advisor for Regulatory and Resource Strategy. And we also have Nancy Burns, our Deputy General Counsel. So we really want to, I know we're short on time, so I'm going to try to blast through this quickly. Really, what we want you all to take away from our brief presentation is that we know that EPE is a late entrant into these market conversations. That's really a result of our geographical location in the WEC. We are at the tail end of the WEC, and that's just the way our system is set up. So we are new to these conversations, but we understand how important they are, and we are taking action to be as active a participant as we can. We are asking for the commission's continued support and involvement. And again, we think that today is a great first step, and we welcome future talks. So we think this is going to be great. We've seen success with the development of cost recovery tools and things like that, which we think are going to be crucial for these next steps. So as you can see from our second slide, next slide. Like I said, we understand that this is a huge undertaking for El Paso Electric, and as a result, we've started doing some reallocation of resources within EPE. We've done some optimizations within our groups and operations, resource management, planning, marketing. For example, in the room with us, Jesse Gonzalez, who was instrumental in the day-to-day implementation of EIM and in operations, and now he is in the government affairs group to serve as a dedicated function and liaison between the commission and the utility to help keep these lines of communications open and just keep that flow of information going. We have Ms. Parsons, who's years of legal and regulatory experience, and now she's going to, again, a dedicated resource to help navigate these market development and regulatory concerns. So we are making these moving pieces, these strategic movements within the company to make ourselves more efficient. Can we move on to the next slide? Oh, sorry about that. So how are we being an active participant? So the same conversation as you've heard with everyone today, there's the EIM, there's the EDAM, Markets Plus, there's the Western Resource Adequacy Program, there's the Western RTO conversations. So EPE is taking the initiative to be a active participant in all open stakeholder meetings. We're getting subject matter experts from across the company to attend all task force meetings, trying to get expertise from representation from all over the company out there, creating a voice for us. Again, because we know how important this endeavor is, how monumental this is going to be. And again, like I mentioned, because of our geographical location, whatever it is that we do, it is important that we work together as a region and together, working together as one voice and moving in one direction. One of the larger endeavors that we've undertaken was participation in the WMEG group, which was more of a academic study. I think the largest takeaway from the WMEG is really that the intent there was to create a tool for the utilities to then take and use on your own. I know the deliverable from there is a cost production study, wasn't me, is a cost production study, which is kind of a cost benefit study, which is kind of a misnomer. It's more of a production cost study. But just the sheer amount of data and months and coordination between 26 utilities to develop this model and make sure that it works, and we're able to simultaneously forecast two working markets within each other. The benefit of WMEG is that it allowed a contractual vehicle where we are able to work with E3 individually now using the model that was built. So we can now take that model and the cost benefit study, which shows region-wide results. We can now take that study and make it our own, implement our own operational constraints on top of that. We can take it and develop it and add it on to all of these other stages that we know are going to eventually need to be looked at for the day-ahead market, resource adequacy studies, eventually an RTO study. So again, keeping in mind that we know how important it is, the collaboration with our neighbors and working together as one region. EPE has already started working with PNM, as you've heard. We are working with PNM and E3 on some individual runs of this report, seeing different scenarios on what the market would look like if we had, different geographical footprints, the creation of different seams. We are part of an informal Desert Southwest utility group. Again, the same process. It's just the Desert Southwest utilities coming together, sharing information, discussing what's been learned over the last open meetings in EDAM and Markets Plus. And again, where do we need to go? What do we need to do? What are you seeing? What are you learning? What works best? Back and forth. And it's this sharing of information that's becoming vitally important between everyone. Again, and we'll touch more on this in a little bit, but the YRAB, BOSER, WEAM, that is also incredibly important, because that is how we can attack these issues from the regulatory and legislative forefront. But to talk more on our first entry into the market development stage in EIM is Mr. Gonzalez. So I'll hand that over to him.
Go with the next slide, please. Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Don't want to sound like a broken record, but as Mr. Villalobos indicated, El Paso Electric has been the most recent EIM entrant. And the impetus was really twofold. One, first of all, it was really to enhance EPE situational awareness. And then the second was to realize the economic benefits via transfers to mitigate overall production, purchase power costs and fuel costs. The slide, you'll see the diagram insert. So you could really tell it really illustrates EPE's geographical footprint and where we're at in terms of the WEC, and also illustrates the overall connectivity that we have. And as has been previously stated, our primary connectivity points are with PNM and TEP, we're Tucson Electric Power Corporation. Our geography plays a critical role in a lot of EP's decision-making in terms of which markets we're going to be participating in. Next slide. So really, the next slide really just hammers once again our participation overview. El Paso Electric commenced EIM operations on April of this year after an extensive 2-year implementation. So, and part of that implementation was really numerous software additions to support EIM systems, numerous integration efforts, and also the addition of employees to support the new EIM desk functions and after the fact settlement functions. From EP's initial market study, we were expected to see approximately 16.3 million in company on a company basis in terms of market benefits and stuff. And it seems like El Paso Electric is on track to realize those benefits. And as has been explained, in terms of benefits, the benefit to customers is through the fuel class in terms of total revenues being distributed back to customers. And this has kind of been addressed also by previous participants. But in terms of market functions, the WEIM is really an intra-market market. So it's intra-hour, 5-minute and 50-minute intra-hour transfers. In terms of overall functionality, our day-ahead group is still critically important in engaging in bilateral transactions in the market and so forth. So in terms of overall participation, we still feel that that's still a critical link in terms of enhancing reliability and ensuring reliability, and especially in terms of when we have these heat domes that affect the entire Western region for that matter and stuff. Our day-ahead operations do mitigate a lot of that exposure. Next slide. The next slide really just provides a synopsis, if you will, of EP's notifications to the New Mexico PRC with respect to its EIM participation. From left to right really is first arrow, if you will, was just really our notification of intent to join the Western Energy Imbalance Market. A point of emphasis is on the middle arrow, if you will, which really highlights EP's application for an accounting order governing the treatment of costs related to joining the Western EIM. And I think, I want to emphasize that that's also a critical point, right? As we explore new markets, whether it's joining a full-blown RTO or engaging in new day-ahead markets, obviously there's implementation costs, as Kelsey alluded to. It's an extensive process. It's for EP, it's been about approximately 2 years. There's numerous costs that are incurred by the company. So cost recovery is obviously of critical importance as well. And the last row, if you will, or to the right is really our notification, our go live notification notice. Next slide. And really the next slide or WEIM activities or updates is really where are we now, right? So, and this is really from a functional or operational perspective. As has been alluded, the work never stops, right? And there's constantly, as you guys, really good relevant questions is, there's constantly this constant refinement, enhancement of everyday activities in order to realize these benefits. So El Paso Electric is really looking at its market performance almost on a daily basis. Really, we're reevaluating, as our second point illustrates, the operating characteristics of our generators to make sure that they're meeting all of their dispatch operating points as dictated by the full network model and the optimization. And we're doing that obviously to ensure that we're enhancing EIM benefits as much as possible. We're also looking at overall trend analysis, right? So as you kind of progress through the year, you'll see there's greater imports during a certain particular time period, greater exports during the evening hours as solar resources come offline. So we're definitely looking at that, establishing trend lines to further enhance EP's reliability functions, and also to enhance our overall market strategies to once again optimize or enhance EIM benefits that ultimately benefit customers.
Next slide.
Next slide.
The next slide is we threw it in there. It's kind of an estimated timeline. We put together some pertinent industry milestones along with some milestones that we hope EPE is able to reach. As Jesse was talking about, a 2-year implementation timeline for the EIM. And as we've heard today, these markets are developing quickly and, based as well as we can base these estimates here. The we're hoping to continue, our secondary studies on the WMEG and continue our stakeholder meetings. So we're really hoping to be ready to be producing a market gap analysis study somewhere around Q3 of 2024. By then, we would have already started working with the Western Resource Adequacy Program and started working towards some of those initiatives and, getting more details on what, that program might look like for us. We'll hopefully be on track to make a decision on what a market decision will look like for El Paso somewhere around Q1 2025. Again, all this is subject to change on how quickly or how slowly these market development footprints are moving. Go on to the next slide, and then this will, Ms. Parsons will be able to comment on some of the recent regulatory efforts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Judy Parsons. I'm a Senior Advisor for Regulatory and Resource Strategy. So my portion of the presentation, I just wanted to touch on some of the regulatory efforts that EPE is either actively participating in, has participated in, things that we're monitoring at the state level, at the FERC level, as well as stakeholder participation. So I just want to say generally, EPE is very mindful of the regulatory considerations as an integral part of these market exploration efforts. So as mentioned by Mr. Gonzalez, I think one of the key regulatory proceedings that happened that EPE was a part of was our application back in 2021. So that one really addressed the cost recovery mechanisms for the EIM costs. Some other state regulatory efforts that we're monitoring was California Bill 583. So that kind of focused on the exploration and creation of an RTO. The bill was withdrawn. However, subsequent to that, there was a letter from regulators sent from CREPC to WIRAB, and that was on July 14th of 2023. So essentially what that letter called for, it was state regulators call for a viable path to electric market inclusivity and exploration. So that one was supported by regulators all over the Western states, from New Mexico, Washington, Oregon, California, and Arizona. So I think that is, one part of how regulators can have a voice and can truly monitor these market activities and the RTO expansions. In addition to that, and we did address this in our comments, the FERC regulatory efforts. And I know SPS and PNM did touch on this in their comments, as well as EPE, a couple of tariffs that have currently been filed with FERC, one of which was the RAP tariff that was filed back in February 2023, as long as the CAISO EDAM tariff that was just recently filed a couple of weeks ago with FERC in August. So some of those tariffs are important because they touch on some of the issues such as governance, commission participation, and just involvement there at the FERC level. So can we go to the next slide, please? So this slide kind of touches on a couple of examples of some stakeholder participation and as part of the continued market exploration endeavors. So some of the ones that we've identified just recently are the WEEP committees and the subcommittees. I know SPS did mention this also, but these market committees and working groups, specifically the SPP Market Plus state committees, the WEEM and the BOSSER, as Mr. Villalobos touched on as well. So like PNM, we are embracing and welcoming these workshops and the collaboration with stakeholders. And that's the next section for workshops, meetings, and market participation. So one of which is the fall joint CREPC WIRAB meeting that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. That is a forum for state regulators, other active participants and stakeholders to get together to collaborate on some of these important market development issues that are important to them, and also collaborate with FERC. So this is kind of an important meeting, happens twice a year, and it's really where all of these interested stakeholders can collaborate and have joint efforts in this endeavor. But also in addition to that is the EDAM forum that happened a couple weeks ago that was in Las Vegas. I call that to your attention because I think it's important. There were regulators, from New Mexico, other states, Washington, that gave their point of view on what is happening in their states, some of the topics that are important to them, specifically to these market exploration endeavors. That's something that's important to us. It's something that EPE is mindful of, and we're listening on that. Again, these are just some examples of some participation efforts, and like the other utilities and Mr. Villalobos said, this workshop is very important to us, and we'd like to continue having these conversations and collaborating with interested stakeholders. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Villalobos.
This next slide was really just more of a, as we were going through our comments and the responses to the inquiries from everyone else, these same recurring themes were popping up just as we were having these conversations amongst ourselves and PNM and SPS and Joe Taylor on the phone. And we were joking amongst ourselves saying, well, what are we going to talk? If you talk about this, well, what are we going to talk about? Because we're all here to say the same thing. And here's this, this list of the same things that we're all talking about. And again, it just brings to mind that, we're all moving towards the same direction. We're all looking at the same thing. We're all concerned about the same issues, and it's relevant to us, governance. Do we need governance reform? How should that look like? What should we be looking out for? Market footprint implications, how do we run studies? How many studies do we run? What should that look like? How will, all of this affect ratepayer considerations, benefits? How do we make this affordable, first of all? Again, like we mentioned, the RAP and resource adequacy, because this is, of course, of utmost importance. The regulatory aspect of this, again, and how EPE is taking steps to dedicate resources to be a part of these conversations. Again, planning and timelines as to all of this is multiple years-long implementation process. So we need to keep mind in how these these changes are very fluid, but always in constant flux. But that's all that we have for you today. The next slide is just our contact information. Again, we're open to any questions, and thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity, and we're always available.
Thank you for the presentation and written responses. In the interest of time, I'll ask one quick question and turn it over to the other commissioners. What do you suggest we focus on in future workshops?
I would recommend, I agree with the response on the importance of transmission. After that, I would really focus on expanding the WMEG studies. I think it's going to be important for us to take that tool, which took probably about 18 months for us to create, and start to really digest the results of that study and really make it implement our operational constraints and really bring it from being a wide study to a region-wide entity specific study. I think that'll be really of utmost importance, that we can really bring numbers that mean something.
Thank you. Commissioners, Chairman.
I appreciate what you said about Mr. Villalobos, and I'd say next workshop, you guys should make sure you go first, because
That's not what I said.
I know, because what I heard PNM say is El Paso's going to pay for all this WMEG work, right? So don't let them get in front of you. But anyway, I appreciate you being here and the information you provided today. Thank you. And looking forward to continued work
As are we. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and for being here today. Do you have any, I guess, thoughts about your experience, your short experience to date with the EIM? Are there any lessons learned or anything that's surprised you?
I'll go ahead and speak to that. Just kind of to reiterate, like these timelines are extremely lengthy. For El Paso Electric, it really was quite a paradigm change and involves so many internal stakeholders that have to kind of row in the same direction, if you will. So those are obviously considerations now kind of going forward is just how extensive and intensive the overall implementation process really is and how they really affects a lot of these particular timelines. Also, we've done a lot of work in terms of after the fact settlement analysis. We also did various sensitivities with respect to our initial market study in terms of greater available transfer capacity and how that did in fact correlate to greater EIM benefits. So there's that correlation as well. And just to kind of reiterate, El Paso Electric also does have firm transmission rights. We have a critical exchange agreement with Tucson Electric that would also, how these next markets or these forward markets or regional markets kind of treat that type of transmission arrangement is going to be of critical importance to our everyday operations. And as a corollary, also, I was also in charge of all the natural gas operations and stuff, and that has EIM functionality has also had extensive impacts on overall natural gas procurement and transfer of natural gas, et cetera, in particular during the winter seasons and so forth when there's operational pipeline considerations as well. So I think it's far reaching, and I think these regional markets are also going to be far reaching as well. So
just building a little bit on that, I mean, even though we've only been active in the EIM for a few months, that 2-year implementation line that took upgrades in IT software, processes, staffing, training, upgrading generation. I mean, it's just the entire entity has to change. And moving on to the next step, which would be a day ahead market, and then moving on to the next eventual step, the natural progression to the RTO, will be just as intensive. So it's these types of conversations that are going to be very helpful for us to be able to come here and talk to you all and express our growing pains and let you know that this is the help we need and this is what we're going through. And so again, just thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you all. We'll have a break. Why don't we come back at 4:45? So 8 minutes.
4:45.
Okay, let's start a come back, please, to our seats. Good. All right, so now that we are back, we'll continue the workshop with our next presentation by Ricky Seguin, who's the Executive Director of Interwest. And I just realized that you're the only, presenter that I introduced, so I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, I feel very honored, Commissioner. Okay. Ricky Seguin, Executive Director, Interwest Energy Alliance. I won't repeat my mediocre jokes. Those don't have to be memorialized. Also on the Zoom from Interwest is our staff attorney, Chris Leger. So if in fact you do want to ask the hard questions, I have backup here that I'd love to employ. My comments today, I think it's interesting that they're coming after the utilities because they're a little bit of stage setting. And I think it is an exciting moment in time that the stage setting that I would do as the head of a trade association is very similar to what you heard from our utilities in the state. And I think this is a good moment. It is a good thing to celebrate that it appears that we are all moving in this direction. And Kelsey sort of said it best, that I'm going to paraphrase now, but you kind of can't be not talking about this. And at this point, this option of working together, of regionalization, of market opportunities, it's sort of a foregone conclusion. Something's going to happen because the benefits are undeniable. And I think that is, again, a really exciting thing that we should be celebrating here today. And thanks to all of you for your leadership and bringing this issue forward and giving us all the opportunity to write 70-page dissertations on the importance of markets. It's a good thing for us to do, to reflect, and I think a good thing for New Mexico stakeholders to have the opportunity to really dedicate time to. So with that, I'll move into my presentation. Very briefly, Interwest is a regional trade association representing utility scale renewable energy companies. So wind, solar, storage, geothermal, pure play transmission. We work in 6 states in the region, however, are headquartered here in New Mexico. And on slide 3, you can see the list of member companies within Interwest. I think that that's important to start with because our interests are very aligned with the utilities that you heard from today, but also different. And what I'd like to communicate here with all of you is that moving forward in the step ladder of market opportunities before us is good, but stopping short of a full RTO leaves real opportunity on the table. And from the perspective of the renewable energy industry, getting to the benefits of centralized transmission planning and cost allocation is key. And if we stop short of getting to the RTO, we haven't done all that we can do. So that's where I'm going with this presentation. Slide number 4 is my general framing for you that you all know because you stepped into these jobs at this dynamic moment in time when the grid is just going through a fundamental reset. We built out the electric grid at a time when significantly fewer people lived out here. We were not building renewable energy resources, and we were definitely not talking about climate change. That's just not the state of play today. And it is upon all of us, the responsibility is on each of us to adapt to the changing nature of the grid. We know we need more renewable resources online because that is what the law dictates. We know that we need more transmission because the lines that we have are essentially full. We know that we're facing reliability challenges because of extreme weather. We see it all around us. And 4, we know that customers are hurting and we need to keep costs stable and low. Enter an RTO as a helpful tool to help us adapt and get ready for all of these changing dynamics.
Again, our perspective and our priority as an organization is getting to a full RTO in the West. On slide 5, I think it's important to take the overall benefits you've heard about RTOs and think about them really in the lens of New Mexico from your positions as regulators of this state. An RTO in New Mexico can help with decarbonization here, a faster way for us to reach the decarbonization requirements that we have, that our utilities have. It can help us with our reliability needs here in New Mexico. It can help with affordability, decreasing the inefficient parts of our grid that we have just become used to at this point. And importantly, it can help with economic development. New Mexico is sitting with huge potential here to serve as a leader in supplying clean energy to the rest of the West that is begging for it. This can be the boon that our state needs to getting jobs and money invested in our state. So New Mexico has the opportunity to win pretty big if you go to a full RTO scenario that is set up in a way that works for New Mexicans. On slide 6, this is what you already know. The way we're doing it right now is just clunky. We have a very balkanized system that unfortunately leads to real inefficiencies that hurt customers. We have overbuilding for reliability's sake that is valuable, but not something that we necessarily need to do in a full RTO sharing construct. There's no incentive to build regional transmission, and we will talk about this, but absent some better way of organizing our grid in the West, we can't really fault our utilities for that. Building regional lines is not something that they are incentivized to do. So you see merchant transmission developers going through the 17 to 25 year process of doing it. We should probably think about ways to do that better. We're paying more for moving electricity across different utility service territories, and we're seeing less competition on the grid, ultimately resulting in higher costs for customers. We can do this better. What a moment in time we're in. On slide 7, this is again, just sort of the steps that we can take to getting toward a full RTO. And I want to say it very clearly, we should be celebrating the actions that our utilities in New Mexico are taking on these steps toward a full market. We've already heard about the benefits and the challenges with integration into real-time markets. And we heard a lot about the opportunities ahead that come with day-ahead market opportunities. Importantly, that falls short of reaching the benefits, particularly around transmission, that only come with the full RTO. So my takeaway that I'm hoping to impart with you is let's not stop short of the full enchilada here as we celebrate good actions along the way. You will see this spelled out more in our comments, as well as the many other comments that were submitted into the investigation on slide 8. But what's really touted as the analysis on RTO, really market benefits in the West, is the state-led market study. And while it's pretty small there, essentially by all metrics you look at, the benefits improve each step you take on that ladder. So let's take all the steps. Let's move up the ladder. Slide 9. This is where I think where I'll slow down a little bit, because I think I've repeated what you already know and what other people have said. But from the perspective of the renewable energy industry, this is pretty key. Looking at the Western Interconnect, existing laws now have 80% of Western load aligned on decarbonization. The scale of growth for renewable energy development is unlike anything we've ever seen before, and absent probably some few very imaginative people, it's probably bigger than anything anyone has imagined. The scale of growth for renewable energy in the West, we have on slide 10. Existing policies require 9 gigawatts of brand new renewable energy facilities to be built every single year for the next multiple decades. Over 150 gigawatts of brand new wind and solar built in the West simply to meet the laws on the books today. I think we have about 5 gigawatts of renewables online in New Mexico today. I mean, it is big time for renewable energy growth. And this is why you see such an interest from the renewable energy industry in the conversation around an RTO. We want to be able to compete in a broad Western marketplace that values these renewable energy resources. And New Mexico really can be a leader here because of our extremely productive, world-class wind and solar resources. And you heard it from Kelsey, our wind and solar in New Mexico is looking pretty good in the Pacific Northwest. Absent the transmission planning and absent some reason to build regional lines, it's going to be really hard to move those renewables to market and also to bring into New Mexico the resources that we need here to have our system be reliable and affordable and decarbonized. On slide 11, I put up the recent map and report card that Americans for Clean Energy Grid issued around transmission planning. Unfortunately, in WestConnect received a grade F for its planning methods. And although WestConnect is ostensibly doing regional transmission planning, there's no member entity advocating for projects to maximize regional benefits. That is just not how our system is set up. Each utility is advocating for projects that maximize benefits within its own system, as well it should be. But moving toward the full RTO is the only way you get to the centralized transmission planning, cost allocation formula that you need to get these regional lines built. This will help with getting New Mexico renewables to market. This will help with bringing in low-cost renewables for from other regions into New Mexico. And then slide 12, this is helping with reliability. We need, in this world where we're going to have a 100% clean energy grid, we need a grid that is built bigger than the weather. That's how we keep it reliable out here. And we just have very few options to do that in an affordable way right now, absent a major change to our grid. I have two final slides that I want to cover very briefly. The first is I just feel like I have to say the word seams. This is going to be a thing we have to think about. I don't mean to minimize it, but I do want to say it. You are right in asking the questions about seams, and each of the presenters that you hear from are right in raising that managing the issue of seams is going to be something that we have to deal with. Our recommendation would not be to get too focused at this moment in planning for seams that we don't know what they look like yet. There's a little bit of waiting, addressing, and adjusting as we go with seams, but we would encourage the commission to keep the discussion of seams front of mind, front of conversation each time we're talking about how to integrate into a day-ahead market or into a full RTO. I wanted to end with just a general feel-good moment, which is that you aren't alone in this. We want to celebrate that you have asked stakeholders to provide comments to your questions about market benefits for the state of New Mexico. But on slide 14, I wanted to put up a couple of specific cases and docket numbers where similar questions are being asked, and stakeholders are answering the questions in detail. You heard that there are state mandates in both Colorado and Nevada requiring their electric utilities to join an RTO by 2030. In Colorado right now, there is an open rulemaking implementing Senate Bill 72 and sort of shaping out the process by which the utilities will make clear their plans to join a qualifying organized wholesale market. There is a lot of really good discussion in that docket that I think should this commission want to move forward with future workshops or an eventual rulemaking, I think there are things we could look at in Colorado and see how to adapt them to fit to New Mexico. And in two parties' comments to your questions, SEBA and AEU, as one of the attachments they both filed, is a recommendation submitted by a joint group of stakeholders that includes Interwest, WRA, the Colorado Energy Office, large energy users. It's pretty big list of joint stakeholders there on process recommendations. I think that's something we could look to bring into a discussion in New Mexico about what of that does or doesn't make sense here. So I'd flag that one as being a pretty robust discussion right now. Also in Nevada, there is an open docket to implement Senate Bill 448. That docket does not have any activity in it in this moment. However, in the NV Energy 2021 third amendment to their IRP, there was pretty robust discussion around RTO participation, as well as their IRP investigatory docket. So 2 cases in Nevada, I think, where again, you can maybe pull some interesting discussion should that be of value. And finally, our neighbors to the west do have an open investigation that in some ways looks similar to yours, asking stakeholders questions about market design, pros, cons, risks, benefits, that I would say resulted in less robust feedback from the community in terms of what folks submitted to the commission. However, there are still good submissions in that investigation, and could look to those. So with that, again, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for your focus on this very important issue, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for bringing back the energy to this. I have several questions. I'm going to have to choose wisely. I guess, you know, I share a lot of the same sentiments, especially with respect to transmission. I agree that we need more transmission, especially to meet our zero carbon goals. And I agree that an RTO is the type of independent administrator of such a process that, you know, can say where the transmission needs to be built. And, you know, outside of CAISO, we don't have in the West effective transmission planning. So that being said, since we keep referring back to Kelsey's comments, recognizing that there is trust and confidence, but it is delicate, how should the commission approach this, right? If we believe that, or at least I do, that an RTO is worthwhile, how do I do that without scaring people away and eroding that delicate trust and confidence?
Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I hope you don't scare anyone away. And I think I'm understanding your question in the context of transmission specifically, or more broadly to RTO equals good.
Well, I guess I was giving sort of my main idea of why RTO equals good. And so in terms of getting there, you know, how do we do that? How do we continue to have that conversation, especially given that it's been tried, and you know, right now we're heading towards day-ahead markets, and I have mentioned, you know, full RTOs in panels before, and I always feel like I don't want to scare people away.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. I think each of you have done a very impressive job in the last 9 months or so in making clear what many of your priorities are in serving as a regulator in the state. I think a similar sort of review and articulation could be beneficial in the markets conversation. And I think this investigation is probably the first step. Hearing from the community about what it is that people value in the conversation around market expansion. I expect from here that each of you will have your own top priorities in this changing grid moment. As you show up and speak on these panels or participate in regulator boards or various discussions, I think being able to articulate what the key priorities are for New Mexico in market design will be the way to do that. The reason I think that is I expect some of those priorities may be things like reliability, cost, decarbonization. Within each of those, I think it, from my perspective, is fairly straightforward to draw the link. I mean, the studies show how an RTO helps achieve each of those important goals. So that would be my recommendation, to the extent it's valuable, is hearing now what the community is saying. How does an RTO achieve the state's priorities and this commission's priorities? And then from there, I think it's a pretty straightforward path to draw to the ultimate outcome, which we are hopeful is a big RTO in the West. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I appreciate that. At checking the time, I'm gonna turn it over to my fellow commissioners just to be respectful of people's time.
No, I appreciate that. I thought your questions were better than mine, so I don't have any more questions to ask.
Well, I appreciate the presentation and the input segment. It's a very, very valuable perspective. I don't have any questions at the moment. Thank you.
Well, since they don't have other questions, I will ask another one. So one thing that you mentioned is that you were mentioning the benefits of markets, but you also said that it has to be done in a way that works for New Mexicans. How do we make sure those markets work for New Mexicans? And are there any specific elements of a market that you think is required to achieve that?
Thank you for the question. And one could spend all of their time, probably all of your working hours and all of your peers' working hours, simply tracking and participating in various stakeholder meetings offered by the CAISO and SPP and WEEB and everyone else. How valuable it has been to have New Mexico commissioners show up to many of those meetings, and as I often say publicly, wear the t-shirt with the Zia sun symbol on it and say, yes, New Mexico is here and paying attention. Within that, our priorities for New Mexico are reliability, cost, decarbonization, whatever those things may be. So I would encourage very active participation in reiterating what our priorities are. I think asking for status updates from our utilities, which they appear very willing to give without volunteering anyone or committing anyone. I hope that was okay, but they seem very enthusiastic to provide updates on their progress that they're making on these steps. So I think regular updates from the utilities will be important in you having the information you need to then go out and advocate for any systems required for them to continue on that path. I think it's important to think about how this RTO or markets conversation fits into the utilities IRP process, making sure that the questions about future markets are being considered in any long-term planning that the utility is doing right now. I think that's another way that you can be both making recommendations at a regional level at these various meetings that are happening, but also making recommendations locally with the utilities that you regulate here. I think that is a tool in the toolkit to make sure that New Mexico is seen and heard from. The last thing I would say is that sometimes I fear that the conversation around markets is too siloed into energy agencies. You know, this regulatory body, the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. But as a New Mexican, the benefits for me here are much greater than that. This affects Department of Workforce Solutions. This affects the Economic Development Department. This is a multi-agency opportunity to really help New Mexico thrive. And so while your jurisdiction is obviously very focused on what you're statutorily authorized to do, you have an amazing platform and partnership with other agencies in this state that can stand to benefit from a market that works for New Mexico in each of those lanes. So I would encourage you to continue to work with your peers outside of just the energy space here in New Mexico.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't have any further questions, but just wanted to know that I have been in touch with Chair Blank in Colorado and, been sharing information. And so with respect to the proceedings that they have in Colorado, and I'll reach out to Chair Williamson in Nevada as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Western Resource Advocates, and Dr. Satyal, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you, everybody. And since I'm the last person on the agenda, I will try to explore efficiencies and with my presentation. So Vijay Satyal, Deputy Director, Regional Markets Team at WRA, which is a 6-state public interest promoting nonprofit group that supports decarbonization through markets and competition and also sound and robust planning. Thank you all for having us here, and it's good to see the full new commission here. Thank you. I think I'm switching things a little bit because I've been listening to everybody speak, and I echo what Ricky Segman has just said, that you do have a good and unique time in the West. The utilities are open-minded, not saying markets are bad. Utilities are open-minded, saying they want to come and present to you. And market operators are very aggressively trying to quote utilities in no disrespect, like almost like a dating game. So I appreciate all the efforts everybody is going through. I will, however, put some color and some more finer point on some of the issues, if that's okay. I do have on the call a couple of the WRA team members who contributed to our comments, but I'm the primary author, and I should be able to defend what I say. This is our footprint. This is where we work in terms of state commissions and state legislature. We do not lobby. We do involve ourselves in some legislation where our input is desired. I wish to be very clear about that in New Mexico because of some optics in the past, but also more importantly, on the regional markets level, we are engaged. I see CalISO and SPP here. They're very aware. We are engaged in both the proceedings. We have submitted comments just last week. In fact, just today, EDAM tariff comments are going to folks from us. We are engaged in 3 or 4 areas of SPP Markets Plus, so we're quite involved in all the different areas. I'm going to skip this slide. I think in the interest of brevity, unless you would like to, where the state scope of Western markets is, I think everybody's fully aware. So I'll just go straight to what's in it for us. We like to call them operating principles. WRA in many instances has partnered with clean energy advocates, whether they're trade groups or they are clean energy allies, where public interest matches consumer interest or even larger regulatory policy advancement. Transparency is number one. Good governance is equally number one. It's a heavy, big number two, and the bulk of our comments touch upon some very detailed observations around governance as we responded to your questions. And then we also talk about BA consolidation. That has been a strong principle of ours, just like Ricky had covered earlier. And more importantly, we want to also touch upon transparency, not in terms of process, but like fuel cost savings. I think Kelsey or the gentleman from El Paso Electric talked about wholesale fuel costs get transferred to consumers. That's very important. That should be really highlighted and explained more. El Paso Electric indicated a market gap assessment to be done. That would be wonderful. That the framework for that study could be developed now. So what will that include so that you could tease out these questions that should be answered to explain the value proposition for New Mexico. Another area which I have some comments later towards the end is on optimal and efficient transmission scheduling. I hate to say this, but utilities have power. They have knowledge. Some of it we don't easily avail to. So the more workshops can shed light on this dependency of transmission access would help us better think of creative, proactive ways to engage with the utilities in different procedures of different possibilities. My comments touch upon an issue that we've been highlighting in many cases is path dependency. So what we have is a bit of an unfortunate challenge that you have PNM being path dependent for their destiny through an adjoining utility. Well, that is a problem. And how can we explore that? So should we only look at transmission expansion through markets? Not necessarily. Can we explore transmission expansion without the markets being developed, but also as the markets get set up, then you have a perfect double whammy benefit. So we are in principle and in concept and in practice fully in agreement a full RTO in the West is needed, valuable, and should be done. However, I will touch on this a lot more with a couple of examples. A good RTO in the West is what we need, not just an RTO. It should be one that works, it has depth, it has breadth, and ease of entry and exit. If we don't have that, we could be dealing with some challenges of fixing the market. We could be dealing with challenges where tariffs are being set, but not fully fleshed out. And then there'd be phases to develop it more. And the utilities and stakeholders keep going to these long haul meetings and trying to flesh out tariff language to be perfect or good later, but getting something done quickly. That's an area that we do have area of concern on. So I know I'm holding people back from the end of the day, but what to the. I'm sorry. Yes, and mine's slide 7, please.
Slide 7, please.
My bad. I should do a better job. Thank you. I was, slide 7. I don't know who's coordinating it. So to your left is what a good organized wholesale market can really offer. Everybody's touched upon this in many ways, BA consolidation, independence of board. We work very hard. WRA worked very hard to help set up the governance structure for the WRAP. WRA has worked very hard with our partner organizations where needed to help make sure the Markets Plus governance structure will have a voice for us, an independent sector. And it took many months, and SPP staff have come around and they have helped respond to our request. And now we have a voice there. The EDAM has a joint authority framework that gives a majority veto right for the EDAM governing body to equally have a voice in decision making. So it's not just the CalISO Board of Governors. So these perceptions, if there be any, should all be cleared. But we commend SPP staff for trying to listen and respond to the independent sector, and CalISO staff when we wanted improvements made so the joint authority should be workable. The proof is in the pudding, but that's what we feel. On the right side of the slide, one of the big areas that WR is very interested in is market oversight. We've never had a day-ahead market in the West. We have submitted comments on EDAM requesting clarification on how market monitoring will work. We have requested very specifically to the SPP staff for the first 3 years, there should be a hybrid market monitor, not the independent internal market monitor, because they do run a very good RTO in the Midwest and in the South, in the southern part, Arkansas, that whole region. And yes, they can deploy that same skills and efficiency, but they're going to be stretched. They'll have to hire new staff, totally acceptable. But this is a new footprint. And you have at least 6 states in Ricky's very good slide with environmental requirements or emission constraints. That's going to impact price signals and how dispatch happens. So when we say we believe hybrid market monitoring should be in play, it's not to imply that the current market monitoring process doesn't work. It is to make sure we are custom designing to the Western solution that everyone is seeking. Slide number, I can't see on my own slides. It's the observation slide. Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, but sometimes number shows up and it doesn't. I decided to summarize the observations into 3 areas: support, concerns, and recommendations. Support, we're all on the same page here, but being on the same page doesn't mean we'll all go in the same way, in the same direction. That gets me to a very important area for us is I don't think anyone in this room is driving a car without a dashboard. Everyone has an odometer. Everyone has performance metrics if they arrive an EV car to know how much fuel intensity you saved with how much electric consumption you used, or vice versa. So should be the same with designing these market rules. Either EDAM tariff and Markets Plus, we hope, will have transparency of the tariff language that promotes reporting. And I understand today that has come up in the GAG task force. So thank you, Commissioner Aguilar and Chair Blank, for what I heard. Just was a conversation that transpired an hour ago. That's important in another proceeding at the SPP meeting. My request is that SEAMS be understood from the get-go. Create operating principles that the State Commission does have authority to ask for guidelines on how SEAMS will be managed. SEAMS are going to manifest in at least 3 areas: greenhouse gas, with 2 states with carbon price requirements and 3 states with emission requirements only. You're going to have transmission access seams. We all know that. The assumption that till we don't know the footprint, we can't do anything is where WRA has a different opinion. We do know what seams mean. We do have amazing transmission planning experts that the utilities have, and starting the dialogue, opening up how seams practices currently work. There's a seams task force at SPP, and we commend the staff for having that dialogue. We have some comments there, and I think it will help the clean energy developers industry having more guidance on how these interoperability practices need to be maintained, and nothing stops you from coming up with principles that can then be taken into guidance as the details are fleshed out. So there's a lot of work that could be done even now if you want to be prepared for all the long-term work. WEMEX study. This is an area we have significant concern. The WEMEX study has been in the works for 18 months. We never got a stakeholder presentation. We never got input to give into it. And now it's in the filing, which is great. All power to it. No pun intended. We will review it and appreciate it. But there was no visibility into the study that we could have appreciated how it's looking at the state level impacts or specifically utility level impacts. The findings are great. The end state is great, but it also made a big assumption to only focus on market participation in terms of production cost savings using the WEC anchor data set, which I'm very familiar with. What updates were made to that as you customized the utilities footprint? For the first time, I saw the WEMEX study, part of the filings in New Mexico, when the senior leadership of 3 utilities who were leading this effort indicated the wire up CREPC meeting that they will hold public meetings and present it. So if utilities can come together and do an amazing big study like this, to gain trust, sharing it and having workshops and taking feedback would be valuable too. I don't think that's an unreasonable request. And the last thing is, the RAP. We have made the request to PNM and they've been very considerate to take the request in. Evaluating the RAP as part of the IRP would go a long ways. That's one of the first new resource adequacy program being built in the West. How that impacts the IRP process, how it impacts the PRM selection would be important. And a very logical response would be, yes, let's put it as a sensitivity. No, it should be explicitly part of a portfolio of considerations where you're looking at the changes to the planning reserve margin with and without the RAP. How does that impact their long-term trajectory of excessive capacity buildup to be avoided? What about a RAP combination with transmission expansion scenario? Just some ideas. Next slide, please, which is about the split. Yep. So the reality we're going to have in a few years is, we've all talked about it, seems. WRA is leading an effort to develop common reporting metrics that we would like to submit in proceedings in all the Western states, but also give it to the 2 market operators, hopefully by end of this year, that will identify common reporting metrics, even if you have different ways to price carbon and how GHG accounting will be deployed between the 2 markets. But there could be, and there should be, common metrics that will be in the middle, that you'll have different values on each side. If we really want to meet this clean energy future, having common metrics would help both markets and address some of the seams issues. And the last thing is, there is a desire to, if there's a desire to have a capacity market discussion to also start up, I think even the utilities would agree with me, hopefully. We have enough meetings going on with enough initiatives to track and manage. Energy only day ahead market should be the priority because that is the lowest hanging fruit right now to work on. I close with, that's a slide. Next slide is on why GHG reporting is very important. And I'll do a better job of tracking my page numbers in the future. This just gives the value proposition for why this is going to be very important. And as much as it's been taken lightly, it will come back and be a challenge later if you want to track the UT's performance and the good work they're doing. Next slide, please. So I'll close by, in the interest of time, I'll skip this slide, why GHG reporting is very important for us, because it actually will impact the dispatch cycles, and it's going to totally impact even transmission planning eventually. I'll just close with this slide, thank you, is that there is common interest between utilities, reporting platform providers, clean energy developers to have 24/7 tracking. But it feels like the environmental organizations or decarbonization promoting groups are expected to take the lead on pushing reporting practices. We want good reporting for even transmission usage. So if more than 70% of PNM's transmission, that's just an average generic number. If more than 70% of transmission use of PNM is dependent through adjoining utilities, can we have some better transmission utilization metrics be discussed and identified part of SEAMS? And could there be a proposal for a gap assessment that hones in on or improvises on the WMEG study that identifies what potential renewable energy zones could be tapped into if transmission expansion was to be considered? Because interregional transmission planning ain't happening really, other than some projects that have been built and CalISO's link outside CalISO. If New Mexico truly wishes to export energy up, we would love to see West Connect have more interregional projects proposed with Northern Tier. Haven't seen that, there may be. So anyways, I spoke a bit too quickly, but in closing, I offer an opportunity to partner with our consumer advocates. Consumer advocates want the same thing public interest groups want. Look for the cost savings. Look at where the wholesale costs can come, wholesale cost savings transfer down to retail consumers. Amazing. Can we also look at the counterfactual? What is the cost of not doing anything? Should that be compared, part of the value proposition that the utilities bring to you? And in closing, I'm very open to the idea if the commission would like to explore something that emulates the Colorado approach of a review, but our comments support at least guiding principles that you could issue. That would help them have some kind of a goalpost to go by in deciding what market to consider. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation and for your comments. I certainly appreciate your perspective. So I have two questions. First, you mentioned something about that it doesn't have to be an RTO that is providing the transmission planning. In New Mexico, we obviously have RETA.
Yes.
There is merchant transmission. Is that what you were referencing, or is there some other solution?
Thank you. Actually, and I totally forgot to bring this up. I think finding strategy ways to explore RETA and doing public-private partnerships. If RETA is an opportunity to raise some form of private funds that can be partnered, where the utilities bring a transmission proposal and explore public-private partnerships that can create extensions of the existing build-out, that would be great. That would be exactly one of the ideas and possibilities. If the utilities can assess transmission connection that is not just in-state, but explores a partnership with a developer or a utility adjoining to expand the transmission connectivity, why not? There is a flip coin to this, is in the East, utilities that own a lot of transmission and were part of PJM or New York ISO, especially PJM, they came in with incumbency advantage. And WRI is worried about that too, the long-term advantage in incumbency. So we supported, WRA has been testified and have supported the Greenlink project. We have supported Excel's power pathway. We support transmission to be built. We always will. But realistic and smart transmission planning with leveraging RETA, like Colorado CETA is embarking on to try to do, would be a very valuable tools and means if you can explore.
Okay, thank you. And so I want to make sure to ask you what you suggest that we focus on in future workshops, aside from WMEG. I think we've established that.
I think there are two. One, I think it's pretty abundant. We should learn from the utilities what they are dealing with. So giving them the benefit of the doubt and the onus, understanding the transmission landscape of New Mexico and how dependent it is, and what are the degrees of impact to the transmission system when it's firm versus non-firm. And if they could show some examples of extreme weather events, and they've had grid stress conditions, how dependent is the transmission system on the adjoining BAs or utilities that they are in agreements with? Understanding transmission agreements and adding in extreme weather events would not hurt anyone. Because if you are dependent on APS for many resources or transmission, and Arizona had 26 days of 115 degrees temperature or more in July, then I think you are kind of dependent on how they're also doing. And if New Mexico utilities are able to export energy up in the Northwest, I think conversations with Nevada Energy wouldn't hurt. Exploring interstate regulatory solution between the commissioners on what could be asked as a transmission scenario planning in the IRP for both utilities wouldn't hurt. Regulators have worked together to create the PUC-IM group. I was there as staff from Oregon, and I was also the hearing officer of Boardman Hemingway project in 2008 that just got approved. So Utah and Idaho and Oregon regulators work together to coordinate and share information and understand what needs and requirements were there. So interstate regulator collaboration on promoting interregional transmission, I don't think would hurt, and you wouldn't usurp your appropriate authority.
Thank you so much, Chairman.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I was just thinking through.
You're already coordinating on many matters as regulators, and by the way, for that we commend you all. So, but thank you.
Yeah, no,
Sorry, Commissioner.
that's what I was gonna say is just trying to fight against confirmation bias, but it sounds like you're saying we should do what we're trying to do. Yeah, I've just been thinking through this bifurcated market scenario that you're analyzing. Is that just to understand what that looks like? Is that what you expect? And then when you're saying bifurcated market, and I look at slide 4, when you lay the blue spots on the SPP footprint over the orange and green and blue spots on the Cal ISO Western imbalance market, is that what you mean by bifurcated? And
Correct. Correct. Yes. So these are official pictures of the two market operators, so they can be assured I didn't copyright, steal any images. But when you juxtapose them next to each other, you are going to have 3 seams. We know we're going to have 2 day-ahead markets. So if we take the EDAM footprint, that is for now, the Cal ISO and the Pacific Corp. So when you have that one market, you'll have the markets plus. And then there is some debate, and I'm trying to learn if there will be a third seams between with AESO up in the north. But you have this one seam, you have a seam of the SPP markets plus on the eastern interconnection into the SPP RTO, the main RTO. And I can't, and I don't want to comment on RTO West that's just been initiated. That's just a proposal. But those are the areas. So even if we took a bit of a wild guess from all the phase 1 entities in SPP markets plus, we have a fair guess of a market footprint. We may not have it perfect, but the market footprints will get hopefully cleared by next spring. That's the bifurcated market I'm referring to.
Okay.
So identifying those interties, and I think Pacific will be very willing to share their information. They have already indicated that they are sharing their data from modeling the EDAM with the appropriate entities that they intertie with. So data exists. Coming up with just likely scenarios also by the New Mexico utilities of where their seams could arise, could start the conversation. That should be part of the work focus groups. Workshops.
I just wanted to verify when you said bifurcated, it isn't like, well, half is this side and half is that side.
No, I see your point. I should think about how I frame it.
So anyway, well, thank you. And thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure. Well, Commissioner.
I appreciate your comments, Dr. Satyal, and your presentation. Well, I'm going to have to digest this to come up with some better questions, but I appreciate it. Okay. I appreciate your perspective and input.
Okay, I do want to commend Commissioner Ellison for your other docket on distribution and resiliency. That's a very valuable proceeding as well. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So next on the agenda, we have closing remarks. I'll be quick. I just want to thank you all for your interest, for coming. Some of you came from far away. We have at least one person from the East Coast. I found this to be very informative. There are comments, that I invite everybody else to read. We also have comments from entities who did not sign up for a presentation. Just really thank you, everybody, for the information. And I do intend to have future workshops, and I think we have a couple of good topics that we should focus on, and we'll probably come up with more internally as we continue to digest all of the comments that were provided, and just as questions can continue to arise. So we'll probably talk about that at a future meeting, and maybe I could suggest some topics for future workshops, and then we could talk about dates from there. Do you have any further comments?
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for providing great support for our budget request. We're going to the legislature to ask for some more positions, and part of it was this work. And so the idea this is coming whether you wanted to or not is one of the takeaways from this, that it's complicated and requires attention and offers tremendous potential value for New Mexico. So I think that's a good message to take away from today. So I mean, I heard that across all the presenters.
I appreciate the attendance and the participation today. It's very valuable to hear from the utilities as to what your experience has been and what your thinking is around how to move forward. It's very useful to hear from those who have spent a lot of time thinking about markets in the West. I think that helps provide important perspective, and appreciate Commissioner Aguilera's work in putting this together. So thanks to everyone.
Yes, thank you. And sorry, I forgot to acknowledge you in your leadership on this. So thank you, Commissioner Aguilera. And then, so now is a time where we go around the room, get a reflection from everybody. Actually, I'm feeling that there is no objection to adjourning. We were adjourned, and again, thank you for coming. A lot to digest, and looking forward to seeing what we do next year.